Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are all doing well. A few videos back, some of you may remember that Elichem sent me some of their Aqua Cast Turbo. This is a super speedy curing eco-poring medium. It is now available to purchase on their website and I have a code for you guys, which is in the description box down below. This is what the brand new launched kit looks like. It's a nice big chunky box. Now I am going to be having a play with air dry clay. You guys know I had to try it out. I already know that Louise Singleton has used the original Aqua Cast with air dry clay. I want to try it with turbo and see what results we get. It worked a dream for Louise. I'm going to be using this stunning silicone mold. Now shout out to Tony from Crafty by Tony here on YouTube. She gave me this mold alongside many more and it is stunning. I'm going to take some castings from this silicone mold so that I can use them to emboss my air dry clay. And I'm going to be using the black polyurethane to do this. You can get this from MB Fiberglass. I get my black polyurethane from Denise at I Love Mixed Media. She's here in the UK. If you cannot get hold of any, then do check out MB Fiberglass on their website. They have got many different polys. I'm just filling up this mold. Now, again, thank you so much to Tony. Crafty by Tony here on YouTube has been a friend of mine since the early days of YouTube, since I started around 7-8 years ago. And we've met a few times now and she doesn't live so far away from me anymore. So she came to pick me up when I moved here and we went shopping in Corby. You would have seen that on my home channel. And she bought this huge box of goodies with her, and in that box were multiple molds and new mugs that she got me and a couple of things that she'd made me. And yeah, she's just an absolute diamond. But of course, you guys know I absolutely love botanicals and I could not wait to use these molds, specifically the monstera leaf, the ferns and the flowers and all of the yumminess. I know that these are going to make absolutely stunning imprints and embossing patterns. The flowers are just stunning. Now, I'm not 100% sure where these molds are from, but I know that Tony works a lot with Prima and Finnabair molds, so my guess is that they are either Finnabair specific or they are Prima molds in general. These monsteras are just absolutely gorgeous. Now, the polyurethane, if you are new here, is a very super speedy, quick pour, quick, fast setting medium. You literally mix both components A-B together for 30 seconds, pour it, demold 30 minutes later, which is what makes it the perfect material if you just want to do a project like this. But again, I did overspill, so I did have to trim some off. Doesn't really matter because I'm embossing the good side. The backs don't really matter, but here we are. I'm going to be using the standard oval trinket dishes that most of us have. If we're doing resin or any kind of eco pouring, most of us do have these molds. These are standard tray molds from Amazon, and I literally need to take an imprint of that central bit. So that's where I'm going to be laying the air dry clay. If you are new here, go check out the last couple of videos. I've been experimenting with eco pouring mediums, air dry clay, making inlays, making our own silicone mold of original imprints in clay. So yeah, I've really been having a lot of fun. I just took a little quick break to do the George mold, but yeah, I'm just loving this, guys. I'm loving this so much. So I've pressed the paper down in the mold. I've made my imprint. I know exactly how and where I need my embossings to go. And I've cut that piece of paper out to make sure that I can then cut out my air dry clay and it will fit the mold. First up, I am just pressing some of these stunning leaf castings down into the air dry clay. This was all, even though I have done this a couple of videos back, I made an inlay for a tray, the big rectangular hunky chunky one from Shein. I'm still obviously very new to this, so I'm still gauging, you know, depth. How much depth do I need the clay to be? How thin do I want the clay to be? Can I, you know, how far can I emboss before it's touching the surface of the table. This one here, I think it was this one or the next one I did have to do again because I went through and I accidentally touched the table. But once I'd done that, I laid my piece of paper template down and I cut around it using my craft blade, and I've laid it in the tray. So this is very, very similar technique to the technique I did with the giant rectangular tray from Shein. Very, very similar technique. I'm just using water here. Now, I have sped this bit up because I really took my time on this one. Using water and basically rubbing those edges to make sure that they were fully rounded. And at this point, the clay didn't quite fit the full surface that I wanted it to fit. So I did go back with my polymer pieces and just emboss again, like press them down again. And if any went over, I would either use my finger like you see here, rubbing it along, or I would use my craft blade and cut off any excess that was kind of like dangling over the edge. Next up, we're going to be using these roses. This piece of air dry clay is paper thin at this point, paper thin. And I didn't really realize if or think it would matter. It didn't occur to me that the thickness of clay would matter, that the results would be different. But yeah, this was definitely a learning curve for me. You can see here how paper thin this clay was. I literally went through, you can see, and I touched the table. So I just quickly done another one. Yeah, and at this point, I'm just rubbing around the edges and laying it down. It's very, very samey, very repetitive. So I don't want to keep in every minute of footage. Simple process. And I mean, this is what I would call an inlay. There's different ways to use the inlay, but for me, this is an air dry clay inlay. The air dry clay stays wet. We pour the eco pouring medium while it's wet, and we can use the clay again. Really, really efficient way of making an inlay. Once this is laid down, I just went over some of the embossings. When you peel the clay up, sometimes your embossings can get a little bit disturbed. But like here, I decided to add a little bit more detail, and that pushed the clay over the edge. So I came back in with that craft blade and just brought it back to where I wanted it to do. Now I am using 3 molds. I decided let's do 3 because that's a good number for everyone. This time around I thought, let's just try it. Let's just see what happens if I just put the clay in the mold first and then emboss in the mold. Let's see what results we get. And then I know I can just trim around those edges with my craft blade to get out any of that excess clay. I just wanted to see which way was better for me before I pour in the Aqua Cast Turbo and yeah, experiment. But again, I've cut out quite a lot of footage because this kind of thing, what I'm doing here is very, very repetitive. I'm embossing clay, laying the clay down into the base of the tray, using a little bit of water to soften out those edges, to smooth out those edges, making sure that that clay is fully intact with the silicone mold. And I've done 3 different embossings. I think they're looking absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I'm so obsessed. At this point, it is time to mix up the turbo, the Aqua Cast Turbo. Now, it is a ratio of 100 grams to 40. I had no idea. I'm still very new to this product. I had no idea how much I would use. So I literally did like 160 grams water and then 400 grams of the powder. So this is water activated. You literally have you buy the box of powder and then you just use tap water to activate it and turn it into your pouring medium. So you can see here what the texture looks like, what the consistency looks like. It's I want to kind of call it like rebound's not the right word. It's almost elasticy. I can't explain it. Once I've mixed it up and I'm happy that both the water and powder have mixed, I've decided to go for a selection of blues. Now, purely for the video purposes, I could have used a million different colours, but blue is my favourite colour on the planet, so why not? I'm using the Blue Lagoon pigment in this. The Blue Lagoon pigment is from Homeway Design Co. Again, all of the details will be down below. So I'm just pouring this first mould. This is the very first inlay I made. It has the monstera leaves and the ferns, and the clay is quite thick. The clay is around, I want to say, 1/2 centimetre thick. These trays are quite forgiving. You've got a nice decent amount of room to play with, so I could afford to do a nice thick layer of clay. Next up, I've added more pigment into the Aqua Cast Turbo, and I'm going to be pouring it, but it was at this point I realised it's getting quite thick at this point. Now this is a super speedy demold in 15 minutes, super speedy eco. So you can see here, oh my goodness guys, I was running out of time rapidly. This is already 3 times as thick as that first tray was. That first tray, it definitely had a pour to it. I could kind of pour it in, but I made such a mess of that second tray. I had to mix up a new batch. I'd used everything. So those measurements that you saw on screen earlier, that was enough for 2 trays. Then I mixed up another little batch for the 3rd tray, and I added even more pigment so that I could make it the darkest one. Sorry about the wobbly camera here. I knocked it. But yeah, this mould, I do not like it. This is one of the most recent moulds I've bought, the cheaper version of, and it's so flimsy. There's absolutely nothing to it. It's just, yeah. Anyway, this is 30 minutes later and it is time to demold. Now, I did leave them in 30 minutes. My original video you would have seen, actually they cure within 15 to 20 minutes. You can demold, but I left them in for 30 just because, yeah, I went and had a cup of tea. But here we are. I am demolding. I'm just cleaning up the edges before I test to see if the air dry clay comes out of the Aqua Cast Turbo. Now, I've already been talking to Aram over at Elichem, and I was telling him what my plans were when I was thinking of how I'm going to use the product, and I explained to him that I wanted to make it with air dry clay. And he was quite excited to see the results as well. He was confident it would come out, but guys, I mean, I would have never expected this. It flew out. It flew out of the mould. I mean, the reason I'm responding like this is because I haven't had it do this with other eco pouring mediums. I can get the clay out. Of course I can. I've done it. But it didn't fly out like this. It flew out of the mould. Not a single crumb was left behind. And look at this. I'm absolutely in love with this one. Now there is that lip around the inside edge where the clay meets the silicone mould. Of course that has come out in the final product. But it's so soft at this point. I'm literally use sandpaper, guys, use sandpaper, but I'm literally using my nail. I'm rubbing my nail all the way around, and that little diddy lip that was formed just came away like a dream. I'm so in love with this, like so in love with this. Again, the air dry clay, I mean, you saw the way it just flew out of there. I could not believe how easy that was. And there's me saying, oh, Claire, get rid of the clay quickly. You don't want to you don't want to spoil it. So that is going to go back in the bag with the other air dry clay. Next up is this tray. This tray I believe this one was the roses. So I imprinted some of those stunning roses and another flower. And remember, the clay was thin, paper thin. I immediately had problems. So I first thought, okay, is it time? Did I, that was the first mould. The one that flew out was the first one that I did. So it's had longer, it's had longer to cool down. Maybe it's colder. Is it because there's more pigment in this tray? All of these questions started coming into my mind. And I was thinking, there's too much detail in the embossing. So maybe it's caught somewhere in the embossing. This one here is the one where I put the clay into the mould and pressed the leaves in. Now, this one was responding like I recognize this response. Like, this is exactly the kind of response I was getting from another eco pouring medium and air dry clay. It was coming out. Once I got that bite, it was coming out. So I was really, really happy this one was flying out as well. The clay was thicker on this one than it was on the roses. So I was trying to, I guess, process of elimination in my head. What differences were there between that first tray and that second tray? Is it the amount of pigment? Is it the depth of clay? Is it the length of time that it was in the mold with the clay? And I guess I had to kind of draw conclusions from the differences in all three pieces. Still stunning. I mean, absolutely stunning. The results of all three trays are simply beautiful. But I think it was a combination of being the thinnest clay. That's how I feel. You know, even looking back at the video, you can see that first tray where the clay flew out, like it literally flew out in my hand. I couldn't believe it. That was thick clay, right? And the flowers and the roses was like paper thin. So I think I've worked this one out. It was literally like I had to think really hard. I had to write down exactly what I'd done differently in each one and why it wasn't flying out of here. This, however, is not an issue because I learned recently from another video that I did. I just have to soak this in water for 10 minutes and the clay literally soaks away. This is the result of that tray. Guys, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed. The rose, it looks like clouds. It looks like blue sky with some lighter blue clouds coming over. Again, this one here, it had the least pigment, it had the thickest clay, but this one also was left the longest to cure up because I did this one first. So, yeah, like I said, I had to put my hat on, my detective hat on, and try and work out why I got different results from the three trays. Equally, they are all beautiful. This one, I have to say, along with the rose one, are my favorites. I put this in, like I said, I put this in a bucket of water just for 10-15 minutes, and then I used a scrubbing brush. The clay literally just comes away so easily. You don't want to scrub too hard though, because remember, if you're scrubbing or sanding this kind of material, you will sand back the actual detail, so you do want to go careful. But I love the way this turned out. It looks like an owl. It just reminds me of an owl's face. This one here, I wish I did this in the one color. I wish it wasn't all different shades of this blue. This one had the most pigment, and I thought, if anything, this is the one I'm going to struggle most with because we've got all of these teeny tiny nooks and crannies from this imprint. But actually it came out great. There was only one or two little places where the clay got stuck in, and again, I could just brush that out with a brush. Not an issue at all. But I'm so in love with these. Could you, if you wanted to, go ahead and make a silicone mold of these so that you've always got the silicone mold? Absolutely, yes, you could. Anything you want to do at this point, yes, you could. If you wanted to brush it with a thin layer of epoxy resin to make it shiny, I would rub it with a glove. I wouldn't brush it. I would use your gloved hand and rub epoxy resin all over. Could you? Yes, you could. And then take a silicone mold so that it's shiny. Yes, you could. Absolutely. Now, I'm going to leave them overnight to fully cure up, and they are done. The Aqua Cast Turbo is available online now at Elichem, and please check out my description box below. But guys, this got me thinking. Imagine these in ammonites. You guys know I'm a massive ammonite lover. A few years ago, I made some ammonite inlays. Imagine making like ammonite forms that you then imprint into clay, putting that in, but then using, like, colouring the Aqua Cast to like a sandy colour. So like you're at the beach and you're finding all of these ammonites in a giant rock, or even a grey. Gorgeous, gorgeous. The other thing I was thinking of, one of the molds that my friend Tony gave me is all about Egyptians and sarcophaguses and tombs and mummies. Egyptian mummies is one of the molds she gave me. That would also look incredible because it would look like a stone carving. Yeah, so many ideas. The Aqua Cast worked a dream. But from my video that I've just done, the video that you've just watched, I would recommend your air dry clay be a depth of at least 0.5 centimetre, 5 millimeters at least, for it to peel happily away from the Aqua Cast Turbo, because you saw the results for yourself and it speaks wonders. Like, the way it just peeled back was a dream. So going forward, if you're going to use this with air dry clay, fully recommend 5 millimeters, 0.5 centimetre or more for your inlays, because that is where you get that clean, absolutely clean breakaway. But yeah, I hope you feel inspired by this. Again, Elichem, thank you so much for sending me over this huge tub. Guys, the details will be in the description box below. If you are still here, thank you so much. And if you feel inspired, then please tag me in your photos. Hashtag Claire made me do it. And you're welcome. I'll see you next time.